Welcome back, night wanderers, to Nakora Nights. There's something different about small towns in Oregon. The fog hangs lower, the streets stay empty longer, and the silence feels like it's waiting for someone to break it. Tonight, we're stepping into the places tourists never see, the forgotten logging towns, the coastside communities, and the mountain villages where strange things still happen after dark. These are 10 true Oregon small-town horror stories, taken from real witnesses who swore they'd never speak of what they saw. A town where every porch light flickered at the exact same second. A man who followed a shadow down Main Street and it suddenly stopped walking. And an abandoned diner that served one last customer, even though it closed 20 years ago. This isn't folklore. This isn't rumor. These are experiences that still haunt the people who lived through them. But before we explore Oregon's quiet nightmares, tell me, where are you watching from right now? And what time is it where you are? Because some towns only come alive after midnight. If you're ready to walk through Oregon's darkest corners, hit like, subscribe, and comment below. I see the small towns. Now, take a breath, don't look toward your window, and keep your footsteps light. This is 10 untold most disturbing true Oregon small-town horror stories. Let's begin. I was just about to fall asleep when I heard the first scream. It sliced through the night air like glass breaking. For a second, I thought it was a cat fight or maybe drunk college kids messing around down the block. But then another scream followed, louder, closer, and there was a voice, deep, angry, slurred, and completely unhinged. It was one of those bone-cold Portland nights where the mist hangs low and the streetlights look like dying candles behind the fog. My window was cracked open because the old heater in my duplex always made the room too hot. I could hear everything, the cars whispering by on Burnside, the occasional train horn in the distance, and now, this man's voice echoing somewhere on the street outside. He was shouting things that made no sense. Cursing at the air, at invisible enemies, at the world itself. I pushed myself up from the bed, the faint light from my phone casting a ghostly reflection on the window glass. I peered through the slit in my curtains. There he was. A big man, maybe in his 40s, pacing in the middle of the street. His jacket hung open, flapping in the wind, and he was swinging a gray sweater over his head like a weapon. His mouth moved nonstop, words spilling out in bursts of rage that didn't seem to connect to anything. I'd never seen him before. Something about the way he moved made my stomach twist. The way his head jerked around. The way his eyes darted through the dark as if searching for something or someone to blame. I knew Portland had its share of strange people, but this man wasn't just strange. He was dangerous. And I, in my brilliant stupidity, was watching him from a lit window. It took me a second to realize that the light from my bedroom lamp was basically putting me on display like a fish in a tank. The moment I thought about that, it was too late. He stopped moving. His head snapped up toward me, and then he pointed. My chest froze. He said something, his voice cutting through the air, hoarse and raw. "Hey, you. I see you. Come here." At first, I thought he was yelling at someone else, maybe another person outside. But his finger didn't waver. It was locked right on my window. "Come here," he shouted again. "Don't hide from me." My heart slammed into my ribs so hard I could hear it in my ears. I moved back from the window and hit the light switch, plunging my room into darkness. I waited for my eyes to adjust, for my breathing to quiet. When I dared to look again, he wasn't in the street anymore. He was crossing my lawn. That was when the panic hit full force. My throat went dry, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grab the doorknob. My brain screamed at me to check the locks. I ran down the short hallway, my socks sliding on the hardwood, and reached the front door. The man's heavy footsteps thudded against the porch. Then came the first pound on the door, loud enough to rattle the hinges. "Hey, open up. I just want to talk." I locked the deadbolt, then pulled the thin chain lock across. It was barely anything, a cheap chain that could probably snap with a good kick. My duplex wasn't exactly fortress material, more like a box of wood and regret. He hit the door again, harder this time. The doorbell rang over and over, his voice rising with every press. "Come on, man. Don't be scared. I see you in there. I couldn't think straight. My dog, Murphy, a small black terrier mix, was barking and growling, pacing in circles around my legs. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find from the counter. My hands were shaking so badly that the blade clinked against the edge of the sink. I ran back to the bedroom, dragging Murphy by the collar, slammed the door, and locked it. That's when I called 911. My voice cracked as I spoke to the dispatcher. There's a man outside my house. He's screaming, pounding on my door. He saw me through the window. I don't know what he wants. The woman on the other end stayed calm, her tone professional but soft. Stay on the line, sir. We've already received another call about him. Officers are on their way. Can you describe him for me? Big guy, maybe mid-40s, dark jacket, kind of staggering. He's right outside my door. Okay, stay where you are. Don't open the door. Keep the line open. While I spoke, I could hear him muttering through the thin walls. His footsteps scraped against the porch, pacing back and forth. Then he started laughing, a long, broken laugh that didn't sound human. I could feel the weight of the knife in my hand, my fingers slick with sweat. I crouched by the door with Murphy pressed against my leg. Then I heard another voice. It came from downstairs, Mr. Hughes, the old man who lived in the lower unit. I'd talked to him maybe twice since moving in. Retired mail carrier, kind eyes, always smelled like pipe tobacco, and now, for some reason, he had opened the door. Hey buddy, Mr. Hughes said, his voice trembling but firm. You need to calm down. You're scaring people. The man's reply was a mess of shouts and curses. My heart sank. I wanted to scream at him to close the door, but my throat locked up. Then, sirens. The sound grew louder until the flashing blue and red lights painted the street outside. I peeked through the curtains again. The man was standing in the driveway now, arms raised, yelling something about how everyone hated him. One of the cops stepped out, hand on his taser, talking in that careful tone they use for people who could explode any second. For a tense few moments, it looked like the man might run or fight. But then he just stopped. The rage drained from him, and his shoulders sagged. He let them cuff him without resistance. The street fell quiet except for the faint static from the police radio. When it was over, one of the officers came to my door. I unlocked it slowly, my heart still hammering. You the one who called, he asked? I nodded. Yeah, we know this guy, he said, jotting something in his notebook. Name's Curtis. Been on the streets for years. Mental health issues, drugs, combination of both. You did the right thing calling it in. I told him everything, what I saw, what he said, how he pointed at me. The officer gave a tired smile, thanked me, and walked back out. But even after they drove away, I couldn't calm down. The house felt different, colder. Like his presence had left something behind in the air. That night, I barely slept. Every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the whistle of the wind through the crack in the window, made me flinch. And somewhere deep inside, I kept thinking about how he looked at me. Not like a random stranger, like someone who recognized me. Why me? The next morning, the police tape was already gone, and the street looked normal again. People walked their dogs, cars rolled by, life went on like nothing happened. But I couldn't shake it. Days passed, and I started noticing things. Small things at first. Footprints in the wet dirt near the side of the house. A faint scratch on the back door that hadn't been there before. The doorbell ringing once in the middle of the night, but no one there when I checked. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. Portland's always been weird, right? Strange people wandering at all hours, noises that echo through the alleys. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Then one night, about a week later, I was coming home late from my night shift at the cafe near Hawthorne. The rain had started again, steady and cold. I parked, grabbed my bag, and walked up the porch steps. The porch light was off. I flipped the switch. Nothing. The bulb had been unscrewed halfway. That tiny detail made my stomach twist. I tightened it back, and the light flickered on, casting a weak glow across the wet boards. Something dark was smeared near the doorframe. At first, I thought it was mud. But when I touched it, it was sticky. I froze. It looked like dried blood. Murphy started barking from inside. My heart raced as I unlocked the door and stepped in. The air inside felt stale, wrong somehow, like someone had been there and disturbed it. Everything looked normal until I reached the kitchen. The back door, the one that led to the yard, was slightly open. I had locked it that morning. I was sure of it. The hinges creaked as I pushed it shut. My hands were trembling again, memories flashing back of that man outside my window. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I called the police again. They sent a patrol car, checked around, and found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no footprints this time. The officer, a different one, shrugged and said it might have been kids or maybe a raccoon, but I could tell from his tone that he didn't believe that either. That was when I started keeping the knife under my pillow. Over the next few weeks, the fear became part of my life. The constant checking of locks, the jolts awake at every noise, the feeling that someone was always just outside. Then came the worst night. It was around 2:17 a.m. when Murphy started growling. A low, deep growl I'd never heard from him before. I sat up, my ears straining. There it was again, a creak from the living room. I reached for the knife, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I moved slowly down the hallway, each step heavy in the silence. The shadows seemed thicker that night, like the darkness itself was watching me. Murphy stayed close, growling under his breath. When I reached the living room, the curtains were moving slowly, like someone had brushed past them. I flicked on the lamp. Nothing. The front door was closed, but the chain lock was hanging loose, the metal hook bent. That's when I heard the faint sound of laughter coming from somewhere outside. It wasn't loud. It was low, like a whisper mixed with a breath. I turned off the light and peeked through the window. The street was empty, except for one thing, something small glinting under the porch light. I stepped out, the cold night air hitting my skin like ice. On the welcome mat was a scrap of paper soaked from the drizzle. It had 2 words scrawled on it in shaky handwriting. I remember. I stumbled back inside, slamming the door, locking everything twice. After that, I couldn't stay there. I moved out within a week. My friend offered me a place to crash in another part of the city. I left most of my furniture behind. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm walking home or sitting in the quiet of my new apartment, I swear I can still hear him. The rhythm of his pounding on the door, the echo of that broken laugh. Portland feels smaller now. The fog heavier. Sometimes when I look out my window, I see a shape in the distance, too still, too familiar. And I remember that night, the way his eyes met mine through the glass, the way he pointed as if he already knew me. People talk about ghosts like they're made of smoke and sorrow. But the real ghosts are the ones still breathing, the ones who remember you when you wish they'd forget. Every scream I hear in the distance, every footstep outside my window makes me wonder if he ever really left. Because deep down, I think he didn't. It started on a night when the wind wouldn't stop whispering through the pine trees. I remember thinking the woods around my house sounded alive, like they were breathing with me. I grew up in a quiet town just outside Eugene, Oregon, the kind of place where you could hear the crickets change rhythm when someone walked by your window. People there always said bad things didn't happen in small towns like ours, but I learned young that monsters prefer silence. Back then, I was 17 and living with my parents in a 2-story house tucked deep in the trees. We didn't have close neighbors, just a narrow gravel road, the smell of damp earth, and the never-ending hum of wind. I'd always struggled to sleep. Even as a kid, my nights were long, full of shifting shadows and strange sounds. I wasn't scared of them, though. I loved horror movies, late-night mysteries, and ghost stories on the radio. Fear never came easy to me. I thought I understood it. I was wrong. That night began like any other sleepless one. The rain had stopped just before midnight, leaving the smell of wet moss in the air. I turned over for what felt like the 100th time, listening to the creaks and sighs of the house. Then, from underneath my bed, I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping. It sounded like claws scratching wood. I figured it was my cat, Noodle, doing his usual grooming ritual. He always curled up under my bed when it rained. I smiled, rolled to my left side, and whispered goodnight, not even opening my eyes. The sound faded, replaced by the soft pulse of my heartbeat against the pillow. Sometime later, I woke again. The room was colder now. The air had that still, heavy feeling before a storm, even though the sky outside was clear. I realized my blanket had slipped off me. As I reached for it, my fingers brushed something warm that wasn't fabric. I opened my eyes. A man was standing beside my bed. At first, I thought I was dreaming. His figure leaned over me, motionless except for his hand, one long, pale finger poking at my arm, slowly. Curiously, like a child discovering texture. Tap, pause, pause. Tap again. He wasn't trying to hurt me, not yet. He was exploring, testing. I froze, barely breathing. I wanted to scream, but the air got stuck in my throat. The room was dim, only the faint orange glow from the street lamp outside spilling through the blinds. It painted his face in stripes, the hollow of his cheeks, the sharp edge of his jaw. His eyes were wide open, unfocused, like he was seeing something beyond me. My mind screamed move, but my body stayed still. I whispered to myself, "Wake up. Please just wake up." The man jerked suddenly, then dropped to the floor beside my bed, shutting his eyes tight like a kid playing dead. That's when I knew it wasn't a dream. I leapt out of bed, heart slamming in my chest, and bolted down the hallway toward my parents' room. The carpet muffled my footsteps, but in my head, they sounded like thunder. When I reached their door, I hesitated. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe this was another of those half-awake moments where your brain plays tricks on you. I'd seen strange things before, toys turning their heads, shadows whispering. My mom always told me it was just my imagination, the leftover fear from watching too many horror movies. So I told myself this was no different, just another hallucination. Still shaking, I turned back toward my room. The hallway stretched longer than I remembered. My bare feet felt the cold wood beneath the carpet edges. Every step echoed. I peered inside my room, empty. The window was locked, the curtains still swaying gently. My blanket lay crumpled on the floor. I crouched, lifted the bed sheet, and looked underneath. Nothing, no one. My breathing slowed. Maybe it really had been a dream. I crawled back into bed and grabbed the TV remote from the nightstand. Watching late-night shows usually helped calm me down. I flicked on the screen, some nature documentary, quiet and slow. I left the volume low and turned onto my right side, facing the open space of the room. That's when I noticed it. One of my closet doors, which I always left wide open, was now slightly shut. Just enough for a shadow to hide behind it. My heart skipped. Through the sliver of space between the door and the frame, I saw him, standing perfectly still, facing the wall inside my closet, like a mannequin waiting for a cue. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My whole body locked up. I counted my breaths in my head, 1, 2, 3. If I moved, would he move too? I thought maybe he didn't know I'd seen him. Maybe if I stayed quiet, he'd go away, but my eyes betrayed me. I blinked, and the movement must have caught his attention. His shoulder twitched. I slid slowly out of bed, careful not to make the mattress creak. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the remote. I moved backward, inch by inch, until my feet touched the floor. Then I ran. This time, I didn't stop at my parents' door. I burst in, shaking them both awake. My voice cracked as I whispered, "Don't make a sound, there's someone in my closet." My mom's face went pale instantly. My dad sat up, his hand already reaching for the baseball bat he kept beside the nightstand. They didn't question me. Maybe it was the look in my eyes. Maybe it was the tremor in my voice. My dad told us to stay put, lock the door, and call the police. The silence after he left felt endless. My mom clutched the phone, whispering our address, her eyes darting toward the door like she expected it to burst open any second. I sat on the floor, knees to my chest, staring at the shadows dancing under the crack of the door. After what felt like forever, my dad knocked gently. "It's me," he said. I opened the door. His face was pale, confused. "There's no one there," he told us. He'd searched the entire house, every closet, every window, all locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. I shook my head, insisting I'd seen him. I told him about the man under my bed, about the poking, the eyes. He listened quietly, then glanced at my mom. Something passed between them, fear disguised as reason. Then I said something that made both their faces change. He must have had a key. Our next-door neighbor, Miss Lake, was the only person who had one besides us. She'd been our babysitter since I was little, a kind woman in her 50s who always brought fresh cookies and told ghost stories by our campfire. My dad went to her house first thing in the morning. When she checked for her spare key, it was gone. No sign of a break-in at her place either. The police came, took statements, walked around the property, said there was no evidence of anyone being there. Maybe a sleep paralysis episode, they said. Maybe stress. But I knew what I'd seen. The way his finger felt against my skin wasn't a dream. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep without the lights on. My room no longer felt like mine. Every creak in the floor, every brush of wind against the window made me jolt awake. I started sleeping in the living room where I could see every corner at once. My parents humored me, pretending it was just teenage anxiety, but I caught them whispering sometimes, wondering if someone had copied our keys. Then the small things began to happen. My shoes would move from the door to the window overnight. The TV would turn on at exactly 2:17 a.m., the same time I'd first heard the scratching. Sometimes I'd wake to find the closet door half shut again, even though I'd wedged it open with a chair. One night, I heard something heavier than a cat move under my bed again. My breath caught in my throat. This time, I didn't wait. I ran straight to my parents' room. My dad searched again. Nothing. But that night, when I came back to my room, I found muddy footprints on the floor. Small ones, bare, leading from the closet to my bed and back. I couldn't explain it, neither could they. We replaced all the locks again, sealed the windows, even put in a security camera in the hallway. Nothing ever showed. Just empty frames, silent walls, the sound of me crying myself to sleep. Months passed. I started college in Eugene, living in a small dorm near the river. I thought moving away would help. But it followed me. It started subtly, a car parked outside the dorm every night at exactly the same time. A silver sedan with tinted windows. Its engine never ran, but the parking lights were always on. I told campus security. They said it was coincidence. Then there was the jogger. On the trail by the Willamette River, a man in a dark hoodie would stop beside women stretching after runs, asking if they needed help. His voice was calm, polite, but his eyes didn't match the smile. One night I realized it was the same build as the man from my childhood. Same stillness, same posture. I stopped jogging after that. When I couldn't take it anymore, I rented a room through Airbnb off 8th Avenue. The owner was kind, an older lady who kept the place spotless. For the first time in years, I thought maybe I'd found peace. Until the third night. The air vent above my bed started making a faint clicking noise, like something shifting inside. I climbed on a chair to look, using my phone flashlight. What I saw made my stomach twist. Hidden behind the vent grill was a tiny black lens, blinking red. A camera. The police came again. They found nothing linking it to anyone. The woman who owned the place swore she had no idea. But deep down, I knew better. Everywhere I went, he followed. Maybe not the same man, or maybe he was never really human at all. Maybe he was the thing that hides behind curiosity, the kind that watches, learns, touches. The kind that knows when you stop believing it's real. I moved again. I don't tell people about it anymore. They wouldn't understand. They'd say it's trauma or paranoia or nightmares carried from childhood. But sometimes, when the world goes quiet around 3 in the morning, I still feel the faint tap of a finger on my arm, like a reminder. They say Eugene is peaceful, surrounded by nature, full of kind people. But peace is only the space before something moves in the dark. And sometimes, when I wake up at 2:17 a.m., I can still smell the wet pine from that night, hear the soft thump under my bed, and see the closet door slowly closing on its own. I always believed that small towns were safer, quieter, kinder places, but Salem, Oregon taught me how wrong I was. When I first moved there, I was only a freshman, young, curious, and easy to scare. If I had known what waited for me behind those smiling faces and mist-covered streets, I might have never opened my locker that Friday afternoon. The first few weeks of high school felt ordinary enough. The leaves had just begun to fall, and the air smelled like wet pine and burning wood from nearby chimneys. I had friends from middle school, the same old hallways, and nothing seemed unusual. My life was simple until the day I found that first note. It happened on a Friday, right after the final bell. My mom always picked me up around 3:30, but she was running late, so I decided to head upstairs to my locker and drop off a heavy history book. The hallway was empty, echoing with the fading sounds of sneakers and laughter. That's when I saw it. A folded paper taped neatly to my locker door, my name written in red ink with a tiny heart drawn around it. I thought it was a joke. Probably my friends messing around, so I opened it right there under the flickering fluorescent light. Inside, in slanted handwriting, were the words, "You looked beautiful in class today. From your secret admirer." I laughed, crumpled it, and tossed it into the trash by the stairwell. When I told my friends about it later, they all swore it wasn't them. They teased me, said maybe it was a boy, but their smiles faded when they realized I wasn't laughing anymore. 2 months passed. Life went on. I had almost forgotten the letter. Then, one cloudy morning, during second period, the teacher handed out the school pictures we had taken weeks ago. I tucked the envelope inside my locker before heading out for the weekend. That night, there was a football game, so I stayed after school with my friends. We walked around the empty field talking and laughing until the bleachers filled with people. The sky turned orange, and I remember thinking how peaceful everything felt. When I got home, I handed my mom the photo envelope. She noticed one wallet-sized picture missing. I hadn't looked through them carefully, so I told her maybe it fell out. She gave me that look only mothers can give, the one that says she doesn't quite believe you, but she didn't push. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't dropped it. Someone had taken it. A few weeks later, I found another note taped to my locker. My hands trembled before I even opened it. Inside was that missing wallet photo. A heart had been drawn around my face in red ink, the same color as the first letter. The message said, "You looked even more beautiful under the stadium lights." I froze. Whoever this was, they had seen me that night, maybe even followed me. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. I told myself it had to be one of my friends playing a prank again, but something deep inside whispered it wasn't. I folded the note, shoved it into my backpack, and said nothing. After that, things got worse. It started small. Our motion sensor light turning on by itself at night, faint knocks on the back door that disappeared before I reached it. My mom thought it was raccoons or the wind. I wanted to believe that too until the day someone knocked on our front door while I was home alone. It was late afternoon, maybe around 5:15. The light outside had that orange-gray color before sunset. The first knock was soft, almost polite. I ignored it, thinking it was one of the neighborhood kids. Then came the second knock, harder this time, impatient. I sighed, went to open the door, but when I did, there was no one there. Just the empty steps, the quiet road, and the hum of distant traffic. I stepped outside, looked around, and saw nothing. A shiver crawled down my spine, so I went back in and locked the door. 15 minutes later, there was another knock. I ran to the window and saw our neighbor Mike standing there with his dog. He looked worried. He asked if I had someone visiting because he'd just seen a man creeping around our trailer, peeking through the kitchen window. Mike said the man ran off when he shouted. I remember how calm Mike's face was, but his dog wouldn't stop barking. I thanked him, shut every window, and waited for Mom to come home. That night, I barely slept. The following week, my mom found something behind the house, a dead rabbit nailed to the back porch. Its fur was matted, and the way it was left felt deliberate, cruel. She screamed so loud the neighbors came running. The police were called. They said it was probably kids playing a sick prank, but I saw the way the officer's eyes shifted when I told him about the notes. He didn't say it out loud, but he didn't think it was kids. I stopped walking home alone after that. My mom started picking me up right outside the main doors. For a while, things were quiet again. I tried to convince myself the nightmare was over, that maybe whoever it was had gotten bored. Then, on a cold Wednesday morning, I found another letter. It was heavier than before, bulging in the middle. When I pulled the tape off, something small and soft fell to the floor. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I realized it was a rabbit's foot. My stomach turned, my legs gave out, and I screamed. Teachers came running. They thought I was hurt. When they saw what lay on the ground, their faces went pale. The principal called my mom. I had to sit in the office and explain everything. The notes, the missing photo, the knocking, the dead rabbit. My mom arrived, tears in her eyes, furious that I hadn't told her everything earlier. The police came again and took the letter and the rabbit's foot as evidence. They said they'd increase patrols around our neighborhood, but deep down, I knew that wouldn't stop whoever this was. For a few months, nothing happened. Then junior year came around, and I had started to believe maybe it was finally over. Until I opened my locker one morning and saw a typed note inside. The words were printed, clean and even. Your secret admirer from freshman year still thinks of you every day. My hands went cold. I handed it straight to the principal. He said he'd keep it as evidence, but there wasn't much they could do without proof of who wrote it. After that, I never got another note, but the fear never left me. Years later, when I finally moved out of Salem, I thought I had escaped that shadow. But even now, whenever I hear the tap of a branch on my window at night, my heart starts to race like I'm that scared 14-year-old again. I wish the story ended there, but Salem has a way of keeping its secrets buried. A few years later, I returned for college, renting a small apartment near downtown. I had convinced myself the past was gone, just a weird memory. But Salem still felt the same fog rolling in from the river, streetlights flickering like they were alive, the faint hum of loneliness everywhere. One night, while grocery shopping at the only store open after midnight, I noticed the security guard whispering to the cashier. They both stared at one of the CCTV screens behind the counter. I followed their eyes. On the black and white feed, a man in a hooded jacket wandered through the aisles, always a few steps behind different women. He didn't buy anything. He just followed, then disappeared before anyone noticed. The guard muttered that he had been showing up every night for a week. My stomach twisted. I left my cart and walked straight out. 2 weeks later, Salem made the news. A woman had been nearly forced into a white van near the park by 3 men, but she escaped. The van was never found. People started locking their doors earlier. The fog seemed thicker than before. Then came another story. A nurse at Salem General reported a bruised teenage girl brought in late at night. The girl wouldn't speak, and the man who called himself her uncle refused to leave her side. When the nurse tried to talk to the girl alone, the man became angry, shouting that she wasn't allowed to talk. Security had to remove him. Later, they checked the hospital cameras, but the footage of that night was missing. All of it felt too familiar, like echoes of what I went through. The same stalking, the same control, the same silence. I started to think maybe my admirer never stopped. He just found new victims. I didn't want to believe it until one night, around 2:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my apartment window. My building faced the alley, and sometimes people cut through there, so I told myself it was nothing. But the sound stopped right beneath my window. Then came a soft, slow knock, 3 taps, each one measured, patient. I froze. I waited for it to happen again, but it didn't. The next morning I went outside and found something on the ground beneath the window, a small photograph of me from high school. The edges were burned, and a heart was drawn around my face. I packed a bag and moved out that day. I never found out who it was. The police couldn't trace the letters, the notes, or the photo. Every lead went cold. But I know he's still out there, somewhere, maybe still in Salem, maybe somewhere else, watching another girl the way he once watched me. Sometimes when I drive through small towns, I notice how the streetlights flicker, how the air feels heavy, how the shadows seem to move just a little when you're not looking. That's when I remember Salem, and I tell myself never to ignore the first knock, never to laugh off the first note, and never to think it can't happen again, because it can. It always can. And maybe as you sit there listening to the story, you're thinking, it's just a tale, another small-town myth whispered under porch lights. But maybe it's not. Maybe the watcher who haunted me never left Oregon at all. Maybe he's listening right now, waiting for the perfect moment to find a new locker, a new note, a new face to love from the shadows. I always thought small towns were safe. That's what my mom used to say every time I asked why we lived so far from the city. Gresham, Oregon. It wasn't the middle of nowhere, but close enough that nights felt endless, and the woods whispered like they had memories. Back then, I was 12, maybe 13. I grew up on a long, winding road that cut through pine and cedar like a green tunnel. On summer days, the air smelled like moss and hot dirt, and the only real excitement came from exploring with my best friend, Lena. She lived just down the hill with her little sister, Maya. My little sister, Tess, was around the same age as Maya, 7 or 8, and we'd sometimes drag them along when our parents said we had to keep an eye on them. Those summers were all sunlight and laughter, the kind you only get before you know what real fear feels like. Our favorite thing to do was walk to the Riley's house, a neighbor family who had a giant trampoline behind their red barn. It was maybe a 15-minute walk through the woods, 20 on the way back since it was uphill. That day started like every other. The air was warm, humming with bugs, and the sound of the creek running beside the road was soft, hypnotic. Lena and I convinced our sisters to tag along. We jumped on that trampoline until our legs burned, until we couldn't stop laughing. When the sun started leaning west, we decided to walk back to Lena's place for snacks. The trail home wound past thick trees and wild blackberry bushes, their thorns reaching for us as we passed. It was peaceful, the kind of quiet that makes you forget the world is dangerous. We were halfway back, just about to clear the longest stretch of road before Lena's house, when I saw her. A woman was walking toward us. She had short black hair, cut sharp around her chin, and wore dark sunglasses that made it impossible to see her eyes. She was pushing a stroller, the wheels creaking softly over the dirt. I didn't recognize her, and I knew almost everyone who lived nearby. Still, plenty of people from nearby neighborhoods came through to walk, so I didn't think much of it. She smiled politely as we passed, and I smiled back. But then she turned her head and said, in this smooth, uncertain voice, "Hey kids, I think I'm lost." "Can you tell me what road this is?" Lena answered right away. "This is Brookfield Road," she said. The woman nodded slowly, like she was thinking hard. "Oh, that's right. I must have taken a wrong turn. Could you maybe help me find my way back? I need to get home soon. My baby's getting fussy." I remember that moment clearly. Her tone wasn't sweet or nervous. It was careful, deliberate. I looked at the stroller, then at her face again. Something in my stomach twisted. Lena was too kind for her own good. She said, "We could show you where the turn is. It's not too far." But something about it didn't sit right with me. My mom had always said never to talk to strangers, no matter who they were. I heard her voice in my head like a warning bell. I stepped closer to Lena and said, "We can't. Her dad's waiting for us at home." Lena shot me a look, confused, but then her expression changed like she understood I wasn't joking. She nodded. "Yeah, sorry, we really have to get back." The woman tilted her head slightly, her lips pressing into a smile that didn't reach her cheeks. "Oh, that's too bad," she said softly. Then she looked down at the stroller and whispered something I couldn't hear. I wanted to leave. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to go. But when I moved to push Tess and Maya ahead, I glanced into the stroller and my heart stopped. The baby wasn't real. Wrapped in layers of blankets was a plastic doll. Its skin was glossy, too smooth, and its eyes were painted on. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My throat went dry. I stumbled backward, and that's when the woman straightened up. Her smile widened, too wide. "What's wrong, sweetie?" she asked. I grabbed my sister's hand and yelled, "Run!" We bolted. I didn't look back. My chest burned as we tore up the road, Lena clutching Maya's hand. The trees blurred, the sound of our sneakers pounding dirt mixed with the rush of the creek. When we burst into Lena's driveway, her dad was in the garage, working on something with his radio playing. We were crying, trying to talk over each other. I could barely get the words out. A woman fake baby. She tried to get us to go with her. He froze, then grabbed the nearest thing, a golf club, and ran down the driveway. We huddled inside, shaking, watching through the window. It wasn't even a minute later when he came back, pale and furious. He said the woman had been talking on her phone when she spotted him. Then, out of nowhere, a white van screeched up beside her. She threw the stroller into the back and jumped in. The van sped off, gravel flying. That night, none of us slept. For weeks, every sound outside made me jump. I'd stare out my window, half expecting to see those sunglasses reflecting moonlight through the trees. But it didn't end there. About 2 months later, something started happening around Gresham. People were finding notes. A high school girl waiting at the bus stop early one morning found a folded paper tucked under her bag. It said, in neat handwriting, "I can take you to a better place." Another woman caught a man smearing something on her car door handle in an apartment parking lot. He ran when she screamed. Police said it was a chemical meant to make people dizzy. And then there was the story about the teenage girl who'd been chatting online with someone her age. They'd been talking for weeks. When she finally agreed to meet him, she realized he lived in her building. He wasn't 17. He was 47. Everyone in town whispered about it. But I couldn't stop thinking about the woman with the doll. Sometimes, walking home from school, I'd see flashes of black hair near the tree line. Once, I swore I saw that same stroller, leaning against a fence by the creek. When I blinked, it was gone. Lena and I didn't talk about it much after that. It felt like saying it out loud gave it power. But I could tell she hadn't forgotten either. She started keeping her windows locked, even during the summer heat. One evening, around 7:45 p.m., I was in my room finishing homework when I heard a soft knock at the back door. My mom called out, "Who's there?" No answer. We lived far enough from town that random visitors weren't normal. I crept to the kitchen and peeked through the curtain. There, standing under the porch light, was a woman in sunglasses. Even from behind the glass, my body recognized her before my mind did. The same sharp haircut, the same tilt of her head. She was holding something. It wasn't a stroller this time. It was a box. My mom opened the door halfway, cautious. "Can I help you?" The woman's smile was soft. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am. I found this by the creek. I think it might belong to your kids." Her voice, calm, kind, like a practiced melody. I whispered, "Don't take it," but my mom didn't hear me. She reached out. The woman handed over the box, nodded politely, and walked away down the dark driveway, disappearing into the trees. When my mom opened it, her face went white. Inside was a doll, wrapped in the same blanket I'd seen that day. We called the police, but by the time they came, there was no trace of her. No footprints, no tire marks. The officer said maybe it was a prank, but I saw the way he looked around, scanning the woods like he didn't believe his own words. Weeks passed, then months. We moved not long after. My mom said it was just time for a change, but I knew better. She'd seen the look in my eyes when I stared into the trees. We left Gresham behind, but it never left me. Sometimes, when I'm driving at night and the road bends through the forest, I catch myself checking the mirrors, expecting to see her walking behind me, pushing that stroller, her sunglasses glinting in the dark. I tell myself it's over. That it was just one strange woman, one bad memory. But deep down, I know something else. That woman wasn't lost. She wasn't wandering. She was hunting, and maybe she still is. Because last month, I got a message on social media from a stranger. No profile picture, no post, just one line. "You look familiar. Do you remember me from Gresham?" I never believed small towns could hold such darkness. Bend, Oregon looked peaceful from the outside, a place where pine trees framed the streets and every neighbor waved like they'd known you since birth. People called it a safe town, the kind where porch lights were more for comfort than for security. But safety is an illusion, one I learned to see through the hard way. Back then, my family looked like something out of a postcard. My parents, my two sisters, our old golden retriever, and me. We had the kind of life people scroll past on social media and think, must be nice. Our house sat on a quiet street near the edge of town. The kind where you could smell wood smoke in the evenings and hear the river when the wind was right. Life was simple, easy, calm, until the day the man from down the street decided to make us his obsession. He wasn't always strange, at least not that anyone noticed. People said his name was Mark, but most called him that guy with the black truck. He lived a block away, quiet at first, but you could tell something about him didn't sit right. His house always had one light on, no matter the hour. Sometimes you'd catch him standing in the yard, just staring at nothing. But no one thought much of it, until the summer it all started. It began with a stupid argument, something about water use. Mark had flooded his neighbor's yard after a dispute over sprinklers. My parents worked for the local water district, and since we lived nearby, he decided that somehow made us part of it. He drove over to our office one afternoon, shouting our name, demanding to see my dad. He kept saying we'd made it personal. My mom told me later that he slammed the door so hard the blinds shook. From that day on, I started noticing him everywhere. At first, it felt like coincidence. I'd see him in the grocery store, standing by the entrance, pretending to read a receipt but never actually moving. I saw him again at the DMV, sitting 3 chairs away, staring straight ahead without blinking. Then at my job, he walked past the windows, never coming in, just pacing, like a shadow that refused to leave. We tried to ignore it, to pretend it was harmless, but then came the calls. Late at night, the phone would ring, and when we picked up, there'd be nothing but breathing. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Sometimes the silence stretched for so long it felt like it filled the room. Then a whisper, "I can see you." I stopped sleeping after that. A few weeks later, he began parking across the street from our house. Every night, same truck, same spot, same song, blaring through the windows, some old rock track that never seemed to end. He'd sit there from 7:45 p.m. to 2:17 a.m. unmoving. Sometimes I'd see the glow of his cigarette through the blinds. Sometimes I swore I saw his silhouette watching my bedroom window. He was like a statue carved out of madness. My parents called the police, but the answer was always the same. He hasn't done anything illegal yet. That word "yet" started to haunt me. Because when you underestimate crazy, you lose. Then it got worse. One night, my sister and her boyfriend came home from a movie. Mark's truck appeared out of nowhere, speeding down our street. He swerved onto the sidewalk, missing them by inches. They had to jump into the bushes to avoid being hit. He stopped at the corner, rolled down his window, and smiled. That grin was something I'll never forget. Cold, empty, proud. We tried confronting him once. My dad went outside, shouting for him to leave us alone. Mark just stood in the street, holding up his phone, recording everything. Then, minutes later, 2 patrol cars showed up. The officers asked us why we were threatening our neighbor. Mark had called them first. After that, every sound outside became a warning. Every night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for headlights to sweep across my walls. The constant fear gnawed at me until I could barely eat. My hands shook at work. My mom started sleeping on the couch to keep watch. My dad checked the locks 3 times before bed. We lived like prisoners inside our own home. One night, while walking our dog, I saw him again. He was leaning against his truck, watching. When I turned to go back inside, he made a slow, obscene gesture, then laughed. I ran in crying. That was the moment I knew. He wanted fear. He was feeding on it. Months passed. The police reports piled up, all useless. Then came the night I'll never forget. Christmas Eve. My dad was in the hospital after suffering a brain aneurysm, barely surviving. My mom had been staying there for days, refusing to leave his side. I begged her to come home, even for an hour, to shower, to rest. She finally agreed. We pulled into the driveway that evening, the snow falling soft and slow, muffling everything. The street looked peaceful for once. No truck, no headlights. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Then came the knock. It was around 8:15 p.m. A man stood on the porch wearing torn clothes, holding a wrapped present. His eyes were dull, like he hadn't slept in days. "Delivery for the family," he said. We asked who sent it. He shrugged. "Can't say." We asked who he worked for. His face twitched. "Don't worry about it." He shoved the gift toward us and walked away fast, disappearing down the street. My mom and I just stared at each other. Something felt wrong. The paper was cheap, the handwriting on the tag shaky. It just said, "To the family." Against my better judgment, Mom opened it. Inside was a thick stack of papers, typed, printed, stapled together. A fake lawsuit. Pages filled with lies and threats, claiming we had ruined his life, that we would pay. My heart sank when I saw his name at the bottom. Mark. That wasn't the scariest part. The scariest part was realizing he had been to our door, again. After that, things spiraled. Mark started pacing outside his car at night, pretending to talk on the phone. He'd say things loud enough for us to hear, about pushing my mom down the stairs, about knowing where I worked, about how easy it would be to end all of this. I'd peek through the blinds and see his shadow moving back and forth, his hands waving in the cold air, his voice carrying through the stillness. I started working the late shift at a coffee shop downtown. I'd close up around 1 a.m., and every night, without fail, his truck would be there. Sometimes parked beside mine, sometimes waiting a few spaces away. I'd drive different routes home, turning randomly, doubling back through quiet streets. But no matter what, the same headlights followed. Always the same distance, always silent, either silent. Once, I pulled over by the old hiking trail near the forest edge, hoping to lose him. The air smelled like pine and wet dirt. I turned off my headlights and waited. The road was empty. Then, through the trees, I saw something. Folded women's clothes laid out neatly in a circle, right in the clearing where the moonlight hit. A chill ran down my spine. I turned my car around and sped home. Later, I found out that same trail had been mentioned in police reports. People had seen strange things there, like someone setting up objects, always women's items, always arranged like some kind of ritual. No one was ever caught. The next morning, at work, one of the baristas whispered that a man had been sitting across the street, taking pictures of girls leaving the shop. When she called him out, he just smiled and drove away. I didn't have to ask who it was. That night when I came home, I found something new. Under my bed, shoved against the wall, was a piece of rope, stiff, dark, stained. My breath froze in my chest. I didn't scream, I didn't move. I just backed out of the room and called the police. They came, looked around, took the rope, and told us again, "It's not enough. Not enough." Those words became poison. It wasn't until my mom's friend, a district attorney, heard the story that something finally changed. She came over, listened, and said she'd take our case pro bono. For the first time, I felt hope. The trial took months. We each had to testify. I wasn't allowed to be in the courtroom when my family spoke, and they couldn't be there for me. Reliving every moment in front of strangers was torture. The defense tried to twist everything, painting him as unstable but harmless. But the evidence stacked higher than his lies. When the verdict came guilty, I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. He got 18 months, a felony restraining order. For the first time in years, our house felt quiet. We tried to move on. We even laughed again. I thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. But monsters don't die that easily. He moved after prison. Far away, we were told, but he didn't disappear. He found us again, through paper this time. Letters arrived, all in the same messy handwriting. He'd addressed one to my sister, who had died in a car accident while he was still locked up. He wrote that she'd lied about him, that she owed him, that he deserved the money raised for her funeral. He tried to sue her estate, claiming she'd destroyed his life. The same court threw it out. But the letters didn't stop. Some nights, I still hear the sound of an engine idling outside my window. I tell myself it's nothing, that it's just my mind replaying the old fears. But sometimes when I look out, I swear I see a shadow leaning against a truck, cigarette glowing in the dark. It's been years since the trial, but Bend hasn't felt like home since. The streets still look peaceful. The river still hums. The neighbors still wave. But behind it all, I can feel it. That slow, quiet pulse of something rotten hiding under the calm. People ask why I still live here. I tell them I stay because fear shouldn't decide where I go. But truthfully, maybe I'm waiting. Waiting for the night when the truck returns. Waiting to prove to myself that I'm not still that terrified kid watching from behind blinds. And if you ever find yourself in Bend, and you see an old black truck parked under the streetlight, engine humming long past midnight, don't look too long. Don't stare back. Because once he notices you noticing him, it's already too late. I still remember that night like a cut that never heals, always tender, always ready to bleed again. I had no reason to think anything bad would happen when it all began, just a young woman living alone in a small town called Medford, Oregon. I worked the evening shift at a little bookstore near the downtown square, spent most weekends at small music shows, and believed strangers were mostly kind. Back then, I trusted people far too easily, and maybe that's what opened the door to the nightmare that followed. It all started years ago when I was 22 and obsessed with live music. Every week, I went to local shows, festivals, and bars. In Medford, everyone seemed to know everyone, or at least acted like it. I met new faces every weekend, people whose names vanished from my memory the second I turned away. I thought it was harmless fun. When people added me on social media, I accepted without thinking. That's how he found me. His name was Michael, or at least that's what his profile said. His picture showed a man with graying hair and tired eyes, someone older, maybe mid-30s. His smile looked lazy, almost soft, like he didn't mean harm. His first message was strange but not alarming. He asked if I was the girl who danced near him at a small concert in Ashland the night before, twirling in a circle and disappearing into the crowd. I told him he must have the wrong person. He replied with a light joke about having a twin out there and said it made him smile to think about it. I laughed it off, never thinking that small exchange would dig its way into every part of my life. Over the next few months, he messaged me again and again. Sometimes he asked if I was going to upcoming shows. Sometimes he mentioned seeing people who looked like me at music events in different towns. He wrote like he knew me. At first, I answered a few times, being polite, the way I always was. I never learned to say no to people. But the more he wrote, the more uneasy I felt. His tone shifted from friendly to familiar, from casual to personal, like we were close. When I stopped replying, he kept messaging. The notifications piled up. I told myself he was harmless, maybe lonely, maybe confused. I was naive. About a year later, during the summer, my two best friends, Jenna and Marcus, and I planned to drive to a big outdoor music festival held on the outskirts of Oregon near the mountains. It was called the Sunlight Gathering. Thousands of people came from all over, tents covering the fields like colorful patches. It was one of those events where you could lose your friends for hours and meet 10 new ones in the process. We packed our car, drove the 6 hours north, and set up our little tent under a cluster of pines. The second night, we were lying on a blanket under the stars, watching a band play. Lights flashed, smoke rolled through the crowd, and laughter came from everywhere. I felt happy, really happy for the first time in months. Then, out of the darkness, a man walked straight toward our blanket. He sat down beside me like he belonged there, close enough that I could smell the faint mix of cologne and sweat. His voice came low, smooth. He said, "I thought it might be you." I turned and froze. It was Michael, the man from Facebook. The man I had never met in person. My mouth went dry. I couldn't even remember the color of his hair from his profile, but now, under the flickering lights, I saw it. Gray mixed with dark, long enough to touch his collar. He looked exactly like his pictures, only older, heavier. He smiled wide, like an old friend reunited. "Didn't think I'd actually find you here," he said. My friends looked at him, then at me. I forced a laugh, said we must have met before, trying to make it seem normal. Inside, my heart was pounding. He started talking about bands I'd posted about years ago, mentioning tiny details I'd forgotten, like where I'd gone hiking once, or the color of the scarf I wore in an old photo. He talked like we'd shared those moments together. When the set ended, I told Jenna I needed to stretch my legs. We stood up, told him we'd meet later near another stage. He nodded eagerly, like it was a promise. As soon as we were out of sight, we ran. We walked in circles through the maze of tents, afraid he might be following us. That night, when we finally got to our campsite, we whispered about it for hours. Jenna said we should pack up and leave. I told her no. It was a big festival, he wouldn't find us again. I wanted to believe that. I wanted the fear to feel silly. But the next afternoon, while we were dancing near a smaller stage deep in the woods, I felt eyes on me. That heavy feeling crawled up my neck before I even turned. And when I did, I saw him standing between two trees, just far enough away to blend with the shadows. He was watching me, still, silent, with a faint smile that never touched his eyes. My stomach twisted. He didn't move closer, didn't wave, just stood there as if waiting for me to acknowledge him. I turned to Jenna, told her we had to go. We pretended we'd forgotten about another show, grabbed our things, and hurried away. After that, I didn't see him again. The festival ended, and I pushed the whole thing out of my mind. I told myself it was just a creepy coincidence, that he must have been one of those people who misunderstood friendliness. When we got back to Medford, I stopped checking Facebook altogether. A year passed. I moved into a small apartment above a coffee shop on Main Street, trying to build a quieter life. I'd almost forgotten Michael existed until one night when Jenna came to visit. We opened a bottle of wine, started reminiscing about old times, and the festival came up. We laughed about it, called it the Michael incident. She asked if I still had the old messages. I said yes, though I hadn't looked at them in ages. Curiosity won. We sat on the couch, my laptop open, the room lit only by a single lamp. When I scrolled through the messages, the laughter died. The last time I'd opened them had been years ago, but he hadn't stopped writing. There were dozens of messages, paragraphs, photos of tickets, maps of shows around Oregon. He wrote about me as if we were still talking, as if we'd planned trips together, as if we were in a relationship I didn't know about. He said things like, "Can't wait to see you at the next one," or "bought us seats in the front row." Then came one that made my skin crawl. "I'll pick you up around 7:45 p.m. outside your place in Medford." I know the way now. My hands shook. I hadn't told anyone my address. And yet there it was, a line that said he knew where I lived. I slammed the laptop shut. Jenna stared at me, face pale. "You need to block him," she said. I didn't even respond. I went straight to Facebook and hit block. My hands were trembling so bad I had to press the mouse twice. When I finally did, a wave of relief hit me. It was over, or so I thought. Later that night, around 10, we decided to get a drink to shake it off. We drove downtown, parked near a small bar called The Lantern. It was quiet, soft music, old neon signs. We sat near the entrance, ordered 2 beers, and tried to laugh again. But something felt off. The door opened, and I froze. Sitting at the far end of the bar, under the dim red light, was Michael. His head turned slowly, eyes locking on mine. He smiled, stood up, and started walking toward us. Every hair on my body stood on end. Jenna whispered, "That's him, isn't it?" I nodded, my pulse racing. He stopped a few feet away, still smiling that calm, knowing smile. "I can't believe it's you," he said softly. "I was just thinking about you tonight." His voice was the same as before, low and friendly, but there was something under it, something cold. He asked how I'd been, said he missed our conversations, said he'd been worried since I stopped replying. I forced a nervous laugh, said I'd catch up with him later, that I had to use the bathroom. I grabbed Jenna's wrist and pulled her toward the back hallway. We didn't stop. We went past the bathrooms, out the back door to the patio, and then jumped the short wooden fence behind the bar. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely breathe. We ran across the alley toward my car. As I unlocked it, I looked back. He was there, coming out the side door, scanning the street, his eyes locking onto me again. The calm smile was gone now, replaced by something harder, emptier. We dove into the car, slammed the doors, and sped off. My hands shook on the wheel as we turned corner after corner until the lights of the bar disappeared behind us. For weeks after that, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in my apartment made me jump. I kept checking my locks, my windows, even under my bed. One night, I woke at 2:17 a.m. to the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Slow, steady, measured. I held my breath. The steps stopped right outside my apartment. Then came a soft scrape, like metal brushing against the doorknob. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, ready to call 911, but the sound stopped. After a long minute, I forced myself to peek through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I didn't sleep again that night. Days turned into weeks, and nothing else happened. I told myself it must have been my imagination. But one afternoon, when I came home from work, I noticed a folded flyer tucked under my door. It was for a local concert at the edge of town. The date was that night. In black ink across the bottom, a message was scrawled, "Don't make me dance alone." My vision blurred. I tore it up and threw it away. The next day, another flyer appeared. Then another, each one closer in tone, more personal. "We still have songs to finish. You promised you'd meet me again." I went to the police. They said without proof of threat, there was little they could do. I started staying at Jenna's house. Still, the fear followed me everywhere. My phone buzzed one night with a new friend request from an account with no picture, no name, just a location tag, Medford, Oregon. I didn't accept. But the next day, when I checked my notifications, the account had sent a message, "You don't need to hide. I found you once. I can find you again." That was the night I decided to leave Medford. I packed what I could into my car, quit my job at the bookstore, and drove away before dawn. As I left town, the radio caught static. For a moment, through the noise, I thought I heard my name, whispered low, like someone speaking through the signal. I shut it off and drove faster. It's been years since then. I moved across the state, changed my number, deleted all social media. Sometimes I still dream of Medford, the smell of rain, the glow of streetlights, the sound of footsteps that aren't mine. I never saw Michael again. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment at the bar, when he looked at me like he'd known every move I'd make before I made it. I wonder if he really just showed up by chance, or if he'd been following me longer than I ever realized. A few weeks ago, a small package arrived at my new apartment. No return address. Inside was a concert flyer, crumpled, old, stained with something dark. Across it, written in messy black ink, "It's time to finish our dance." The paper smelled faintly of smoke and rain, and the date printed on the bottom wasn't from the past. It was tomorrow. Eliza Moore never liked quiet streets. There was something about silence that felt wrong to her, like a warning before a scream. She'd lived in Corvallis, Oregon, her whole life, a small green town where everyone seemed friendly until the sun went down. The river glistened under the bridges, and the college students brought the city a pulse that never really rested. Eliza was known around town as a dog walker, the kind who could handle any animal, no matter how wild. She'd started walking dogs when she lost her job at the diner 2 years back. Since then, the four-legged creatures had become her only real friends. But there was one dog that changed everything, a pit lab mix named Kira. Kira was all muscle and heart, half shadow, half sunshine. When Eliza first met her, Kira was impossible to control. She would lunge, bark, and snarl at the sight of any other dog. Her owner, a quiet woman named Miss Talbot, had begged Eliza to help. "Just don't give up on her," she'd said. "She's better than she looks." And she was. Through months of work, patience, and treats, Eliza turned Kira into a walking miracle. The once reactive dog now trotted calmly beside her, head high, eyes bright, tail swaying with pride. People who had once crossed the street now stopped to admire how gentle she'd become. It was a late October evening, one of those dusky Oregon twilights when the air smelled like wet leaves and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. Eliza had just finished walking a golden retriever across town when she picked up Kira for her evening stroll. The clock on her phone read 7:45 p.m. She clipped on Kira's leash, patted her head, and said softly, "Let's go, lion girl." That was what she called her, lion dog, because when Kira stood guard, she looked like she'd fight the whole world. They started their route through the old neighborhoods of Corvallis, where the houses leaned with age and the streetlights hummed like dying insects. Kira walked perfectly, glancing up every now and then for her reward. Eliza smiled each time, proud of how far they'd come. The sidewalks were wet, reflecting the dull orange glow of the lamps. A breeze whispered through the maples. Somewhere far off, a train moaned, lonely and distant. Everything was peaceful. Until it wasn't. They turned down a narrow side street that looked empty, quiet, safe. Eliza liked this path because there were no other dogs, no distractions, just still air and the sound of her boots on pavement. She was relaxed, humming to herself, when Kira suddenly froze. The dog's ears lifted, her tail went stiff. "What is it, girl?" Eliza asked softly. No answer, of course. Just a low rumble in Kira's throat. Eliza turned around. No one. She laughed under her breath. "You're just hearing things." But as they walked another 20 feet, Eliza heard it too. Footsteps. Slow, steady, dragging slightly, like someone walking through fog. She stopped again and turned. Still no one. Her stomach tightened. "Okay," she whispered. "We're going this way." She crossed the street quickly, her boots slapping wet asphalt. The sound of footsteps stopped. For a few minutes, everything was still again. They passed the small community college, empty at that hour. The building's windows reflected only the streetlights. Kira seemed calmer, sniffing the ground. Then, suddenly, a shout. Loud, garbled. Too close. "Hey, your dog!" Eliza spun around. A man stood less than 10 feet behind her. How had he gotten so close? There was no sound of approach, no warning. He was tall, 6 feet at least, and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark hoodie that hid half his face. His voice was rough, his eyes unreadable in the shadows. Before Eliza could react, Kira lunged forward, teeth bared, growling like a wild thing. The leash burned Eliza's palm as she held tight. The man's arms flew up. "Whoa, whoa," he shouted, but Kira wouldn't stop. Her snarl turned guttural, primal. She lunged again, barking in a way Eliza had never heard before, a sound of real fury. The man took a step back, then another. His face twisted fear, or guilt, or something darker, and then he ran. Straight across the street, vanishing into an alley between two houses. The night swallowed him whole. Eliza's chest heaved. Her breath came fast. Kira's hackles stayed raised for a long time before finally easing down. Eliza knelt beside her, hands shaking, whispering, "Good girl. Good, good girl." She gave her every treat left in her pocket. She stood there for a full minute before deciding to head home, this time taking the main road with more light and noise. But even then, she couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. When she got to Miss Talbot's house, she told her everything. The woman's face went pale. "You said he shouted something?" Miss Talbot asked. "Just 2 words I caught, you dog. That's it." The woman frowned. "People don't sneak up on others like that out here." "Not unless they're looking for trouble." Eliza nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." Kira sat by her side, calm again, licking her paw as if nothing had happened. When Eliza left that night, she decided she'd never take that side street again. But a week later, she heard something strange. At 9:21 p.m., her phone buzzed. It was Ms. Talbot. "Eliza," she whispered, voice trembling, "did you walk Kira near Birch Street last week?" "Yes," Eliza said, uneasy. "That's where it happened. There's police tape there now. Someone found a camera in the trees. They said it was aimed at the sidewalks, like it was recording people walking by." Eliza's blood ran cold. The next morning, the local news mentioned it briefly. Hidden surveillance devices discovered along residential walking paths. Authorities suspect they were used to monitor pedestrians, particularly women walking alone. Eliza turned off the TV. She thought of the man's shout the way he appeared from nowhere. She thought of Kira's instinct, the way the dog had stepped between her and the stranger. And then she thought of all the times she'd felt watched before, how she'd brushed it off as paranoia. That night, she had trouble sleeping. She lived in a small apartment near the river, the kind of place where every noise carried. Around 2:17 a.m., she woke to Kira's growl echoing in her mind, though Kira wasn't there. Just the hum of her refrigerator, the creak of floorboards, the wind pressing against her window. She tried to shake it off, but then came a sound, soft, deliberate like gravel crunching outside her door. She froze. It came again. Footsteps. Someone was there. She reached for her phone, hands trembling, but before she could call anyone, a soft knock echoed through the apartment. 3 times. Knock, 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 knock. Eliza held her breath. Another knock, lighter this time, almost polite. She crept to the peephole. Nothing, just darkness. When she backed away, her phone lit up with a notification, new airdrop request. Her heart skipped. The device name read, "Your dog, your dog." She didn't accept it. She dropped the phone and ran to her bedroom, locking the door. She sat there, knees to her chest, listening until dawn broke through the blinds. The next day, she told the police. They checked the cameras near her building but said they found nothing. Probably just a prank, one officer said. Eliza didn't believe him. She went to see Kira again that evening. The dog barked happily, jumping up to greet her, but Eliza felt a strange energy in the air, like something unseen was waiting. They walked the usual route, avoiding Birch Street, sticking to lit areas. Everything was fine, quiet, until they passed a college parking lot near the south end of town. The lot was empty except for one car idling near the back. The windows were tinted. Kira stopped walking, staring at it. Her tail dropped low. Eliza frowned. "Come on, girl." But Kira wouldn't move. Then the car's engine cut off. The driver's door opened, and a tall man stepped out. Eliza's heart stuttered. It was him. Same build, same way of walking, slow and heavy. He didn't speak this time, just stood there watching. Kira growled again, deep and low. The man smiled. Then, from behind Eliza, another sound. A click, faint but sharp, like a phone camera shutter. She turned. A college student was walking out from the dorms, phone in hand, looking confused. The man froze, then backed away into the car, slamming the door and driving off. The student waved awkwardly. "You okay, ma'am?" Eliza forced a nod. Yeah, fine." But she wasn't fine. That night, she sat awake, scrolling through local forums. A post caught her eye. "Anyone else getting weird messages near campus?" Mine said, "Where's your dog?" The username was Riverwatcher89. The thread had no replies. Over the next week, the town started buzzing. More women reported strange encounters, someone following them, whispering, recording. One student even found a hidden phone under a bench behind the dorms. It was filled with stalking videos. The police called it disturbing evidence. The footage showed women walking dogs, jogging, talking on their phones. One video made Eliza's heart stop. It was her, walking Kira, turning down Bird Street, smiling. The date stamp, the same night as the attack. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her phone. She turned off the screen, sat in the dark and whispered to herself, "He's watching." That night, she slept with the lights on. Days passed. The police said they were investigating leads. But Corvallis was small, and gossip moved faster than truth. People said the man was a former campus worker, maybe a janitor, maybe a security guard who got fired. Others said he lived in the woods outside town watching, waiting. Eliza didn't care who he was. She just wanted to feel safe again. She bought a can of pepper spray and a small knife. She started walking Kira only during the day, but even then the feeling of eyes on her never left. One afternoon, near the old railroad trail, Kira stopped and barked furiously toward the trees. Eliza followed her gaze. At first, she saw nothing. Then, movement. A man's silhouette just barely visible through the leaves. He wasn't moving toward them, just standing there, still as stone. Eliza froze. Kira growled, the sound vibrating through the leash. Then the man tilted his head and smiled. Eliza yanked Kira's leash and ran, heart pounding, breath short. She didn't stop until they reached Main Street, full of people and noise. That night, the nightmare started. She dreamed she was walking alone, but Kira wasn't beside her. The leash was empty. The sound of footsteps followed her through the fog, closer, closer, until she turned and saw herself holding a camera. She woke up screaming at 3:16 a.m., drenched in sweat. The next morning, she found muddy footprints outside her apartment door. The prints led straight to her window. Eliza called Miss Talbot, voice shaking. "Can I keep Kira with me tonight, just in case?" "Of course, honey." She'd like that. That evening, Kira slept at the foot of Eliza's bed. The wind howled outside, rattling the blinds. Somewhere far away, a siren wailed. Around 1:42 a.m., Kira sat up suddenly, ears pricked. Eliza stirred. "What is it, girl?" Kira stared at the window. Then came it, the faintest scrape of metal against glass. Someone was trying to open it. Eliza's blood ran cold. She reached for her phone, but before she could call 911, a voice whispered from outside, low and almost playful. "Hey, your dog." Kira exploded with rage, barking, lunging at the window. The glass shook. A shadow moved outside, retreating fast. Eliza ran to the window in time to see a figure disappearing into the fog. She stayed awake until sunrise. Gripping the knife, Kira pressed against her leg. The police came again. They found fresh shoe prints under the window and a small metal hook on the ground, something used to pry open latches. The officer looked grim. "He's escalating," he said quietly. "You should stay somewhere else for a while." Eliza nodded. But she didn't, because something told her that leaving wouldn't matter. The man wasn't after her apartment. He was after her. 2 nights later, everything came to a head. It was cold, misty, the kind of night where fog crawled low and swallowed sound. Eliza took Kira for one last walk before bed. They stayed close to the apartment complex, looping around the parking lot. Halfway through, Kira stopped. Her body went rigid. Eliza followed her gaze and saw a shape at the edge of the lot. The man stood there again, watching. Eliza's pulse hammered in her throat. "Leave us alone," she shouted. No answer. Then he stepped forward, one slow stride at a time. Kira barked, lunging, but Eliza held tight. The man kept coming. Something glinted in his hand, a knife. Eliza backed away, voice breaking. "Don't come closer." He didn't stop. Kira roared, pulling free of the leash. She launched herself at him, teeth sinking into his arm. He screamed, staggering backward. Eliza grabbed a rock from the ground and hurled it at him. It struck his shoulder. He dropped the knife, clutching his bleeding arm, and stumbled into the street. A car turned the corner, headlights blazing. The driver hit the brakes, horn blaring. The man froze like a deer, then bolted into the woods. The car screeched to a stop beside Eliza. A woman leaned out, eyes wide. "Are you okay?" Eliza nodded weakly, tears streaking her face. "I think she saved me." Kira stood panting beside her, fur bristled, eyes fierce and shining. The police searched the woods that night but found nothing, just a discarded hoodie near the river. Eliza never saw the man again, but every now and then she swears she hears him, just a whisper on the wind when the streets go quiet. Your dog. She still walks Kira every week. The lion dog still trots beside her proudly, eyes scanning the shadows. They never take side streets anymore. And sometimes, when Eliza passes the old trail, she notices a new set of flowers left near the trees. No note, no name, just flowers. As if someone's still watching, or remembering. I was 16, and Hillsboro's summer sun felt too bright to hide the things that would crawl out of the shadows later. Back then, Hillsboro was small and quiet, the kind of Oregon town where people left their porch lights on for each other and strangers smiled too easily. I lived with my older sister Marla, who took care of me after our parents split. She was 22, practical, always saying things like, "You've got to learn to handle things yourself." That day, she decided it was time I had my first cell phone. We drove to the mall just outside the city center, the one with flickering lights and empty food stalls. The sky was pale gray, like paper soaked in milk, and the air smelled faintly of rain and metal. Inside the mall, everything echoed: the squeak of shoes, the hum of neon, the hollow laughter of teenagers. At the corner, near a forgotten fountain, was the cell phone shop. The sign read Northline Wireless, though half the letters were burnt out. A man stood behind the counter, maybe in his late 20s, maybe early 30s, with dark hair slicked back and a smile that seemed stretched too far across his face. He greeted us with an easy charm. "Looking for a phone for your sister?" he asked Marla, but his eyes stayed on me longer than they should have. Marla nodded. "Just something basic, she's starting out." He leaned closer, elbows on the glass counter. "We can find something special for her, something she'll remember." He showed me different models, talked fast about features, about plans, about numbers. His voice slid between words like it was rehearsed, smooth and a little too soft. When I picked one, a small flip phone, silver with a tiny screen, he smiled again, that long, knowing smile that never reached his eyes. He asked for my name. I told him. He typed it slowly, glancing up at me between each letter. "That's a beautiful name," he said, quiet enough that Marla didn't catch it. I laughed awkwardly, told him thanks, and we signed the papers. He gave me a phone number, my new number, and said, "If you ever need help with the setup, call me directly." He handed me his business card. The name read Chris Maynard. We left, and everything seemed fine. Hillsboro's clouds had cleared a little by then, sunlight catching the tops of the wet cars in the lot. Marla talked about dinner, but I barely listened. That night, around 8:35 p.m., I was lying on my bed, scrolling through my new phone. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the slow ticking of the wall clock. Then my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar but local. The message read, "Hey, it's the guy who sold you your new phone." I remember hesitating, then typing back, "Oh, hey. Did I forget something?" His reply came fast. "No, just wanted to make sure everything works fine. You looked nervous earlier." It felt polite to answer, so I said, "Thanks, it's working fine." That should have been the end. But it wasn't. For days, the text didn't stop. "You looked really nice today. What kind of music do you like? I've been thinking about you." At first, I ignored him. Then I blocked the number. But the next day, a new number texted me. "You can't block me forever, you know." My stomach twisted. I told Marla, and she brushed it off. "He's just bored. Ignore him. People are weird." But soon, he began calling. His voice always calm, always friendly. "You didn't answer. Are you busy?" "You know I quit my job today. Maybe I'll take a road trip." "You ever think about just leaving this place?" The night he said that, I felt the air in my room change. It was like the walls leaned closer, like something inside the shadows listened too. I told him, "That's crazy." "You don't even know me," he laughed, low and warm. "I know enough. I know you like silver phones and blue hoodies, and you hum when you're nervous." I hung up. The next morning, I told Marla everything. She drove me back to the mall, furious, ready to yell at the manager. But the shop was empty. The sign had been taken down. Inside, the walls were stripped bare, the floor covered in dust. An old janitor passing by said, "They closed last week." "Packed up overnight." Marla frowned. "But we were just here 2 days ago," he shrugged. "Guess they didn't like the rent." I still remember the way the air smelled in that shop, like something burnt and sweet. That night, around 2:17 a.m., I woke to a sound outside my window. A soft scrape, metal against glass. I turned on my bedside lamp, heart pounding, and pulled the curtain. Nothing. Just my reflection and the dark street beyond. The next morning, I found shoe prints in the wet dirt under my window. They weren't ours. Days blurred. Hillsboro felt different now, smaller, colder. The streets I walked home on after school suddenly seemed too empty. Once, near the grocery store, I caught a glimpse of someone who looked like him leaning against a lamppost, pretending to check his phone. When I blinked, he was gone. One Saturday, Marla took me shopping again. We were in a mall outside town, brighter, busier. I tried to forget. We were browsing when I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. Across the corridor, near a toy store, a man watched me. Not moving, not blinking, he wasn't alone. With him stood a woman holding a stroller and a boy holding her hand. A perfect little family. Only they weren't talking, they just stood there, all three of them staring in the same direction. At me, Marla was too busy trying on sunglasses. I turned, pretending to check my phone. When I looked back, they were walking toward us. Calm, synchronized, like they'd rehearsed it. I grabbed Marla's arm and whispered, "We need to go. What's wrong? Just, please." She saw my face and didn't ask again. We walked fast toward the exit, the echo of footsteps behind us. When we reached the parking lot, she fumbled with the keys. I turned once more. The man was standing by a car different from before, but his eyes were the same. He smiled. That night, when I checked my phone, there was a new text. "Nice to see you again." I threw the phone across the room. Weeks passed. Hillsborough's quiet life swallowed the noise. Marla thought it was over. I wasn't sure. Then one evening, she was doing laundry in our apartment's shared room. 10 minutes later, she came running back upstairs, pale as paper. "Someone's down there," she gasped. We both went to look. The laundry room door was cracked open, the single bulb inside flickering. The vents above the washers rattled slightly. Marla pointed. I swear I heard breathing. I climbed onto one of the machines, heart hammering, and shined my phone flashlight into the vent. For a second, I saw something glint, metal, and then an eye, watching. I screamed. We ran upstairs and called the police. They searched for hours, found no one. But they did find something strange, a small hole in the drywall behind the vents, leading to a narrow crawl space. Someone had been there. They found an empty water bottle, a blanket, and a handful of photos. Photos of me, taken from outside our apartment, at the mall, even one from inside my room. That night, the police installed cameras and told us to stay somewhere else for a few days. We stayed with a friend on the other side of Hillsborough. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that scrape on my window again. 3 nights later, Marla got a call from an unknown number. She answered on speaker. A man's voice filled the room, calm, cheerful. "You can't hide in other people's houses forever. Hillsborough's not that big." The call cut. The next morning, we went back to our apartment with 2 officers. The door was unlocked. Inside, the lights were on. My phone sat on the table, but I hadn't brought it with me. One officer lifted it carefully. The screen lit up. There was a new message. "I left you a gift." They searched every room, every drawer. In my closet, under a pile of clothes, they found a small black keychain. It looked ordinary, like a freebie from a store, except for the tiny blinking red light. A tracker. The officer turned to me. "Did you get this recently?" I shook my head. He said quietly, "This model's used in retail displays, same kind stores use to track demo phones." That was the night I changed my number, again. Marla got a restraining order, but no one ever found him. The number went dead, the name Chris Maynard never showed up in any records. Northline Wireless had never been a registered store in Hillsborough. Years passed. I grew older, moved to Portland, tried to forget. But sometimes, when I drive through Hillsborough on my way to the coast, I pass the old mall. It's abandoned now. Windows shattered, weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot. Once, curiosity pulled me in. The inside was dark and silent, the air thick with mold. I walked to where the phone shop used to be. The glass counter was gone, but on the wall behind where it once stood, there was something faint letters scratched into the plaster. It said, "I found you again." I left that building without looking back. Now, years later, I tell this story not because I want to remember, but because I can't stop hearing that voice when the night's too quiet. The way he said my name, the way he promised he'd find me. Sometimes my phone rings late at night, always from a blocked number. Always one ring, then silence. Once, last winter, around 3:11 a.m., it rang again. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it, I heard breathing. Then, softly, like he was standing right behind me, "You never really left Hillsborough." I threw my phone into the sink and ran the water until it drowned the sound. But still, sometimes, I dream of that mall. Of a flickering neon sign. Of a man with a smile too wide holding a silver phone and whispering, "You can't block me forever." And when I wake, I swear I hear the faint buzz of a message on a phone I don't own anymore. Hillsborough sleeps quietly these days. The same streets, the same houses, but sometimes, on foggy nights, people say they see a man walking alone near the old mall, holding a phone to his ear, waiting for someone to answer. If you ever get a text from an unknown number that says, "Hey, it's the guy who sold you your new phone," don't reply. I never believed the quiet streets of Beaverton could hide something dark. They always looked safe, maple trees shining under yellow streetlights, families walking dogs, the soft sound of sprinklers. I used to think small towns kept monsters away. I was wrong. My name is Callie Gray, 27, a sign language student living alone in a narrow brick apartment at the edge of Main Street. I'd moved to Oregon to start over, to breathe again after a long stretch of self-doubt and loneliness. Online dating was supposed to help me meet someone who saw me for who I was. Instead, it showed me what fear really felt like. I was open about myself on every profile except one. The site called Plenty Match. Their rules made it impossible to be fully honest, but I still wrote that I was a proud supporter of equality, hoping anyone kind would understand what I meant. One night, a message appeared. He called himself Ray, said he lived an hour away in Forest Grove. His picture showed a man with dark hair, thick glasses, a smile that looked friendly but didn't reach his eyes. Something about him made me hesitate, that small instinct whispering careful, but I'd learned to ignore that voice because it often came from fear, not reason. We talked. He said he worked construction, smoked sometimes when stressed but wanted to quit. He asked about my classes, my cat, what music I liked. He seemed nervous, ordinary. When he asked for my number, I gave it without thinking. Then I told him I'd be slow to reply because I was getting ready for evening class. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Hi, it's Ray from PF." Usually I sent a short message right away explaining that I was transgender, so everything was clear before things went further. But I hadn't typed it yet when the next text came, "Who the hell is Mark Gray? And why is he paying your phone bill?" I froze. My heart started pounding so fast I could hear it. Where did he get that name? That was me years ago, before everything changed, before I became myself. I typed carefully, fingers shaking. "Where did you even find that?" "Answer the question," he wrote. "Who is he?" He must have paid one of those shady websites that sell people's private info. My throat felt dry. "I'm transgender," I told him. "That used to be my name. I was about to tell you when you started this. Please delete my number." The reply came almost instantly. "Do you still live on Maplewood Avenue? I'm coming to see you so we can talk about this in person." Every light in my apartment suddenly felt too bright. I lied fast. I moved. "Leave me alone. Since you have nothing to hide," he said, "I'll run a full background check." "You lied, and I don't like liars." I snapped a screenshot, every word glowing on my phone like evidence carved in fire. "I'm sending this to my friends in law enforcement. Don't text me again." Then I blocked him. For weeks, nothing. I double-checked locks, closed blinds, told my ex, who still worked with the sheriff's department. They promised to keep an eye out. The fear dulled, turning into uneasy laughter. Maybe he'd moved on. Maybe it was all bluff. Then one evening at the grocery store I saw him. Or I thought I did. Dark hair, thick glasses, standing by the frozen section, just staring. My stomach dropped. When I turned around, he was gone. I called my ex, voice trembling, and they told me to stay calm, to drive home, to keep doors locked. For a while that worked, until the smell of smoke began. It was late, 2:17 a.m., and I was filming my sign language project, practicing the same story over and over for class. My cat darted around, ears twitching. The air tasted faintly like cigarettes. The wall unit AC hummed, dragging air from outside. I turned it off thinking maybe a neighbor was smoking on the porch. When I finally sent the video and went to bed, everything seemed fine. The next morning, rushing to class, I noticed something strange but didn't stop. My brain pushed it aside. Later, when I came home carrying groceries, I saw it clearly. Outside my bedroom window, the gravel patch that served as a tiny garden was scattered with cigarette butts. Not one or two hundreds. Like someone had emptied a car ashtray right there, each filter crushed flat into the stone, each one a silent watch. My neighbor, an old man named Walter, was watering his plants. He looked up and waved. Then, almost casually, he said, "Did your boyfriend ever get a hold of you?" I blinked. "What boyfriend?" "The young man who waited here last night," he said. "Dark hair, glasses, thought he might be yours." The world tilted. I called my ex again. Then the police. They took statements, photos, the screenshots. They said they'd patrol the area, though their faces told me they didn't expect him back. I moved to another town 2 weeks later, far south, changed my number, changed my name. But safety doesn't come with distance. It fades like smoke, always drifting back. In the new place, packages started arriving. Small, unmarked boxes. Inside, photographs. Blurry shots of my living room, my kitchen, my reflection in the TV when I thought I was alone, each one closer than the last. The police said they'd investigate, but nothing ever came of it. No fingerprints. No sender. Just silence. Then came the night drive. I was coming back from work near the edge of Beaverton Highway, headlights slicing through fog. A police car appeared behind me, lights flashing blue. I pulled over, heart pounding. The officer approached, tall, thin, face half hidden under the cap. He asked for my ID. His voice, low, almost familiar. The flashlight caught his glasses. My throat closed. I recognized him. Ray. Before I could move, another car's headlights appeared from behind, washing the scene in light. He stepped back, motioning me to stay. Then he turned, got in his car, and drove off into the night without a word. I sat shaking on the roadside, realizing there had been no police markings on that car at all, just a magnetic light stuck on the roof. The following days blurred together. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every window reflection looked like someone watching. My anxiety grew into something sharp, a presence I couldn't explain. The line between fear and hallucination started to blur. I checked the ceilings once after hearing a tiny click while dressing for class. Above the locker room vents, small lenses, black and cold. Cameras. Hidden. Someone had drilled them through the thin plaster. The gym shut down a week later when others found the same thing, but the images, the idea of eyes above me, stayed forever. Nights became longer. Sometimes I'd wake around 3 in the morning and smell that same cigarette smoke again, even though I lived miles away, top floor, sealed windows. I'd turn on the light, heart hammering, and always find the same thing on my doorstep. A single, unfiltered cigarette standing upright, balanced perfectly in the center. It never fell, even when the wind blew. Once I stayed with friends, thinking maybe space would help. On the second night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, "Miss your cat's midnight dance." I stared at it, the world shrinking around me. Only someone who'd been in my old apartment would know that. That was when I realized what this had become. Not obsession. Not even stalking. It was something worse, something feeding on fear itself. He had found a way to live inside my panic, to make my terror his shadow. The police traced numbers, addresses, names. All dead ends. Ray didn't exist anywhere. No record, no family, no job. The phone number had been registered under a name that wasn't real. It was like chasing smoke. Still, the packages stopped for a while. Life almost felt normal again. I started going out more, studying, smiling at strangers. I even joined a local book club. But one evening, while driving home past the old Beaverton apartments, I saw the building dark and empty, scheduled for demolition. Out of some strange pull, I parked and stood there a moment. The air smelled like rain and ash. In the dirt beside the porch, where the gravel garden used to be, I saw something half buried. I brushed it free with my shoe. A phone. Cracked screen, battery swollen. My old number glowed faintly on the lock screen wallpaper, with a text notification that had never been opened. It said, "Still watching." I dropped it, heart hammering, and ran to the car. The headlights flickered once before turning on. In the mirror, for the briefest second, I saw a figure standing by the porch, dark hair, thick glasses, cigarette burning like a tiny eye in the dark. I drove away without looking back, the image branded behind my eyelids. Months later, I moved again, farther north. New job, new ID, new everything. But sometimes the mail slot clicks at night, and I find a single photo, black and white, edges wet from rain, always the same. My apartment window, curtains half open, me asleep inside. People ask why I never go online anymore, why I keep to myself. I tell them Beaverton wasn't a bad place. It just had a secret. Some people never leave, even when you run. And when the wind shifts just right, I can still smell smoke. I lock every door twice and whisper to the empty room, pretending it's just a memory fading away. But I know better, because fear, once invited in, never moves out. I never used to believe in fear that lingers long after the moment is past. Fear that follows you like a shadow, even when the lights are on. But that changed this past February, in a small town tucked between the mountains and mist of Springfield, Oregon. I've lived here for almost 2 years. I'm a 23-year-old college student studying digital design, working part-time at a small grocery cafe near the edge of campus. Springfield isn't the kind of place where you expect strange things to happen. It's quiet, filled with old houses, student apartments, and thick woods that hide behind the neighborhoods like dark curtains. But sometimes quiet towns hold the loudest secrets. It started on a Thursday night. Rain had just begun to fall, whispering against my window. I remember feeling restless, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, thinking about how lonely my apartment felt. The world outside was soaked in the kind of silence that hums under your skin. I just wanted a distraction, something simple. I ended up chatting online with someone who said he lived just down the street. His name was Mark. His profile picture was plain, dark hair, thin smile, pale eyes that looked gray even through a screen. He told me he lived near the old laundromat on Main Street. That was barely 3 blocks from me. I hesitated at first, but curiosity has a strange pull. I figured meeting someone nearby couldn't hurt. I put on my jacket, left my apartment, and walked down the slick sidewalks through the drizzle. The air smelled of wet pine and cold pavement. His building stood at the end of the street, one of those narrow, aging complexes with flickering lights in the hallway. He buzzed me in before I even knocked. When he opened the door, I immediately felt off. Not scared, not yet, just unsettled. Mark looked the same as his photo, but there was something odd about him. A twitch in his fingers, a strange flatness behind his eyes. Inside, his apartment was dim, smelling faintly of something metallic and sharp. A cat padded out from the corner and rubbed against my leg. He smiled faintly and said, almost too quickly, that her name was Clover. He made small talk. I pointed out that I lived only a few buildings away. He walked over to the window, drew the curtains aside, and said quietly that he could see my place from his. I laughed nervously. He didn't. That should have been my cue to leave, but politeness is a dangerous thing. He started talking fast, his hands trembling slightly as he gestured. Then, suddenly, he froze. His eyes went distant, like he was listening to something far away. For a few long seconds, the only sound was the rain against the glass. Then he blinked, smiled oddly, and said he needed to take something to calm down. I mumbled an excuse and turned for the door. His voice followed me, soft but insistent. "You don't have to go. We can just watch a movie or something." But I was already stepping into the hall. When I glanced back, he was standing motionless, staring at the doorframe like he was memorizing it. I hurried down the stairs, out into the cold, and didn't look back until I reached my building. When I did, he was standing barefoot in his doorway, watching me through the rain. After that night, I tried to forget about him. Springfield is small, but not that small. I figured I'd never see him again. I was wrong. At first, it was small things. When I left for work around 2 in the afternoon, I'd sometimes notice him across the street, walking slow, like he had nowhere to be. I told myself it was a coincidence. But then I started seeing him at the grocery store where I worked. He never came to the coffee stand, just walked down the aisles, glanced at me, and left. Always without buying anything. It became a pattern. I'd leave for work, and he'd be somewhere nearby, sometimes sitting on the curb, sometimes walking the opposite direction, but always watching. By the end of February, the sight of him made my stomach twist. One morning, I switched shifts with a coworker and came home early. As I turned onto my street, I froze. Mark was there, standing on the opposite sidewalk. He kept checking his watch and then glancing up toward my window. When he saw me, our eyes locked. He looked surprised, almost caught. Then his expression shifted into something else, something raw. I can't explain it. Desperation, maybe, or anger. I crossed the street quickly, but he started walking after me. I sped up, reaching my building's door. He followed through the first set of glass doors, but stopped at the locked second one. He pressed his hand against the glass. "Can we just talk?" he said. "No," I answered. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. He watched me for a moment longer, then turned and disappeared into the snow. I didn't see him for a couple of weeks, and the relief felt like air after drowning. My boyfriend Nathan stayed over often, and I felt safer when he was around. He liked to step out late at night for a cigarette. I hated when he did. The streets were too empty, the air too still, but I never stopped him. One night, around 11:40 p.m., he came back inside shivering. He said, almost offhandedly, "You know, there's this weird guy who stands across the street sometimes. He just stares at the building." Asked me for a cigarette once, even though I had one in my hand. I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want to scare him or start something I couldn't stop. Later that night, after Nathan fell asleep, I crept to the window. Outside, under the amber streetlight, stood a tall figure. I couldn't see his face, but when I moved the curtain slightly, he raised his hand and waved. I dropped the curtain and backed away. I didn't sleep that night. From then on, I went outside with Nathan whenever he smoked. Mark was often there, sometimes far away, sometimes close enough that I could see the pale shape of his face in the dark. Nathan never noticed. The nights grew colder, and the silence around us started to feel heavy, like the air itself was watching. A few days later, we went out as usual. The streets were coated in a thin layer of frost, the kind that makes every step echo. We were halfway down the block when I felt it, that prickling at the back of my neck. I turned slightly, and there he was. Mark, walking behind us, maybe 20 feet back. His face was blank, his eyes hollow under the streetlights. My pulse pounded. "Hey," I whispered to Nathan, "let's go back inside." "Sure," he said. "It's freezing anyway." We turned around and headed back. I didn't dare look over my shoulder, but I could hear the soft crunch of footsteps behind us, steady, slow, deliberate. By the time we reached my building, I could feel him still there, right at the edge of the parking lot. Upstairs, we pretended everything was normal. Nathan fell asleep quickly, his breathing soft beside me. I stared at the ceiling, counting every faint sound. Then, around 1:14 a.m., the phone on the wall, the one wired to the building entrance, started ringing. The sound sliced through the quiet. We never get calls unless it's delivery. I froze, staring at it. Nathan stirred but didn't wake. I forced myself to lift the receiver, static. Then a faint, almost whispering voice. "Let me in." I slammed the phone down. My hands were shaking. I unplugged the phone and shoved it into a kitchen cabinet, trying to convince myself it was a prank. But I knew. The next night, I decided to end it. Around midnight, I put on my thick winter coat and went downstairs. The air was sharp and cold, my breath turning to mist. He was there, standing near the lamppost, his head tilted slightly like he'd been waiting for me. He smiled when he saw me. "Hey," he said quietly, as if we were old friends. I just wanted to talk. "Why are you following me?" I asked. My voice trembled, not from cold. He frowned, then laughed softly. "Following? I live here. You're the one who's been ignoring me." I felt anger rising under the fear. You've been watching me for weeks. You need to stop. He stepped closer. The streetlight caught his face, showing deep shadows under his eyes. You don't understand, he said. I see you every day, walking past like I'm invisible. But I'm not. I notice everything. I took a step back. I'm leaving. Don't come near me again. His expression twisted, shifting between pleading and fury. You think you can just ignore me? After everything? He took another step toward me, voice shaking. You don't know what it's like to be alone in that building, to hear the walls whisper at night, to see things move that shouldn't. You think you're safe up there, but you're not. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. I turned and hurried toward the entrance. Behind me, his voice rose, hoarse and desperate. You'll see it too. The lights, the faces. I reached the door, fumbled with my keycard, and slipped inside. When I looked back through the glass, he was gone. The next morning, I woke to find a red ribbon tied around my doorknob. It was thin, frayed at the edges, knotted tightly. I stared at it for a long time before touching it. It wasn't there the night before. I asked around, but no one else had one on their doors. That night, I dreamed of knocking. Soft, rhythmic, coming from inside the walls. When I woke, it was still dark. My phone said 3:12 a.m., and the knocking hadn't stopped. It was coming from the window. I didn't want to look, but fear has a way of dragging your eyes where they shouldn't go. I pulled back the curtain just an inch. Mark stood outside in the snow, staring up at my window. His skin looked pale under the light, almost gray. He lifted his hand slowly and tapped the glass again. Tap, 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 tap. I stepped back, my heart slamming in my chest. Then the lights in my apartment flickered. Once. Twice. Then went out completely. In the darkness, I heard the faint creak of the building's front door opening downstairs. I couldn't move. Every instinct screamed to hide, but my body felt frozen. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept toward the door. The hallway outside was silent. Then, from the end of the corridor, I heard footsteps. Soft, dragging, uneven. I ducked back inside, locked the door, and pressed my ear against it. The footsteps stopped right outside. A whisper came through the crack between the door and floor. You left me out in the cold. Then silence. I stayed like that until dawn. When the sun finally rose, the world outside looked the same as always. Quiet, gray, harmless. But when I went downstairs to leave for work, the manager was standing by the lobby phone, pale and shaking. She said someone had cut the main security line sometime during the night. The cameras near the entrance were blank. That was the last day I saw Mark. He vanished like a fog burned away by morning light. But sometimes, late at night when the wind hits the building just right, I swear I can hear faint tapping on the glass. And last week, when I came home from class, there was a ribbon tied to my doorknob again. The same color, the same knot. This time, I didn't take it off, because some part of me thinks it isn't a warning. It's a reminder that he's still out there, watching, waiting. And maybe, just maybe, he never really left.